Intro 0 o'clock to 1:30. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering your DNA is not entirely your own. That somewhere inside the double helix woven seamlessly between the genes your mother gave you and the ones your father passed down there is a sequence that simply does not belong to either of them. A sequence that was inserted deliberately by something that was not human. It sounds like science fiction. A thought experiment for a modern laboratory. But there was a time, a period longer than all of recorded human history, when it was not a thought experiment. It was reality. For more than 1600 years, the world operated under a completely different biological order. A time long before the pyramids of Giza. Before the walls of Babylon. Before any civilization we have ever named, mapped, or dug out of the dust. A time when the boundaries between species were not fixed. When the very definition of what it meant to be human was being actively, violently contested. Think about the timeline of the ancient world. Adam lived 930 years. Stop and think about that for one moment. 930 years of memory. 930 years of watching his children, and his children's children, scatter across the earth. 930 years to watch a single, catastrophic error in Eden compound across generations he was still alive to witness. Methuselah, his grandson, lived 969 years. The oldest human being in recorded history. Nearly a millennium. One man. One continuous life. But here's the question no one asks about that world. The question that changes everything. What does evil look like when it cannot die? What does a tyrant become when he rules for 400 years? When death, the one force that eventually stops all dictators, all warlords, all human power, simply never arrives. That is the world before the flood. Not primitive. Not simple cavemen hitting each other with rocks. Ancient, yes. But ancient in ways that have been almost entirely forgotten by modern archaeology. And terrible in ways that Scripture preserves, quietly, between the lines that most people skip over. This is the story of what was built in that world. What was corrupted. What was systematically written into the genetic code of humanity itself. And what one man, just one, managed to carry through the water to the other side. CHNG 1:30 to 4 o'clock. The first murder in human history was not a war. It was not a battle over land. It was not a dispute over resources or survival. It wasn't even hatred at first sight. It was an argument about worship. Cain brought an offering from the ground. Abel brought the firstborn of his flock. The ground offering was rejected. The lamb was accepted. And in the silence between that acceptance and that rejection, in the space where Cain's pride curdled into something darker and colder, the world changed forever. God spoke to him directly. Why are you angry? Why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? Cain said nothing. He turned. He walked his brother into a field, and he killed him. What follows is the most chilling exchange in all of early Scripture. God asks a simple question: where's Abel, your brother? And Cain, the first man to ever take a life, the first human being to watch the light go out of another human's eyes, answers with a question of his own. Am I my brother's keeper? No trembling. No horror at what he had just done. No breaking down in tears. Just cold, flat deflection. The first recorded lie in human history was not even a lie. It was a shrug. An act of supreme indifference. For this, he was given a mark. And he went east. To the land of Nod. And there, separated from the presence of God, he did not wander into oblivion. He built a city. Here is what most people miss when they read the book of Genesis. Cain's lineage was not a lineage of savages wandering in animal skins. It was a lineage of builders. Of architects. Of innovators. Of artists and engineers who radically changed the ancient world. Jubal 6 generations from Cain was the father of all who played the lyre and the flute. He discovered that specific frequencies, arranged in mathematical patterns, could alter the emotional state of human beings. He built an instrument. He harnessed sound. And the world was never the same. His brother, Tubal-Cain, was the forger of all cutting instruments of bronze and iron. A metallurgist. A weaponsmith. He looked at raw ore pulled from the dark ground and saw inside it the tools of war. He did not forge plows. He forged blades. Beauty and violence. Under the same roof. Born from the same father. And that father Lamech, seventh from Adam through the line of Cain, did something extraordinary. Something terrifying. He wrote a poem. Not a psalm to God. Not a song of mourning. A song of celebration. Listen to the words of the first piece of literature in human history. I have killed a man for wounding me. A young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. A boast about murder. A man so proud of his violence, so arrogant in his capacity to cause harm, that he set it to verse. He made art out of his own brutality. That is the city of Nod. That is Enoch, the first city, named after Cain's son. A civilization of high walls, of forged iron, of complex instruments, of towering forges. And no altar anywhere. A culture so deliberately turned away from its own origin that it had intentionally erased the memory of who made it. There were towers in that city. There was music filling the air. There was trade, commerce, and industry. There were artists who painted and sculpted, but who had never once looked at the night sky and wondered who placed the stars there. It was a civilization of extraordinary capability. And a soul emptied out completely. They thought they were the pinnacle of existence. They thought their iron and their music made them gods. But on the other side of the world, something else was stirring. And what that something was what it chose to do, and what it produced when it crossed the one line it was told never to cross. That is where this story becomes something Scripture has never fully recovered from. CHNG 4 o'clock to 10 o'clock. The line of Seth was different. Where Cain went east and built a civilization without memory, Seth's descendants held on to something they could not fully see. Something older than the city of Nod. Something that refused to be forgotten in the noise of Tubal-Cain's forges. It was in Seth's generation that human beings for the very first time began to call upon the name of the Lord. Not just to pray silently. To call upon. To gather. Collectively. And speak that name aloud as a deliberate act of defiance against the forgetting of the world. And among them walked a man named Enoch. Not Cain's son Enoch the city. A different Enoch entirely. This one walked with God. The Genesis text gives every patriarch the exact same formula. He lived this many years. He had children. He died. Enoch breaks the formula completely. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. He was not. No death recorded. No tomb built. No burial ceremony. At 365 years old, which was remarkably young by antediluvian standards, he simply ceased to be present on earth. He was taken. Lifted out of the timeline. But before he was taken, he left something behind. The Book of Enoch, a text quoted directly by the Apostle Jude in the New Testament, a text read and revered by the earliest Christians for centuries, tells us what Enoch saw before he was taken. What he was shown. What he tried desperately to warn the world about. And what he saw was a catastrophe already in motion. A biological and spiritual breach that could not be undone. In the ancient Hebrew of Genesis chapter 6, there is a specific phrase that stops careful readers cold. Beni ha-Elohim. Sons of God. It appears in Genesis 6:2 and 6:4. It appears again in Job 1-6 and 2-1, where these exact same beings are described presenting themselves before God in a divine council in the heavens. The Hebrew language is precise here in a way that modern English translations often flatten. Beni Ha-Adam means sons of man, regular human descendants. When the text shifts specifically to Beni Ha-Elohim, it is making a deliberate, intentional distinction. These are not just particularly devout humans from the line of Seth. These are beings of a categorically different order. Entities from outside our terrestrial ecosystem. The Book of Enoch names them the Watchers. Iran in Aramaic, the Observers. The ones assigned to watch over humanity's development from a close proximity, but never, under any circumstance, from direct participation. They were not supposed to cross that line. They were watchers, not actors. 200 of them crossed it anyway. They descended on Mount Hermon, a massive peak sitting at the convergence of what is today Syria, Lebanon, and northern Israel. A place long understood, by every single ancient culture surrounding it, to be a threshold. A place where the membrane between the physical world and the spiritual world was thinner than anywhere else on earth. Ancient Canaanite texts describe it as the meeting point of heaven and earth. The Phoenicians built temples on its slopes. Every civilization that bordered it treated it with the same instinctive, terrifying reverence, as if the mountain itself was a door that could not quite be closed. 200 watchers stood on the summit of that mountain, led by a commander named Shemihaza. And they made a pact, an oath bound by mutual destruction. They did not do this out of blind enthusiasm. They did it out of cold, calculated rebellion. Shemihaza knew what they were doing was a cosmic crime. He had known from the beginning. He did not descend in ignorance. He descended with full knowledge of what it would cost and full knowledge of what it would produce. He proposed the oath because he was afraid the others would get cold feet and let him bear the eternal punishment alone. If every single one of them swore, if they all shared the guilt equally, binding themselves with curses, none of them could back out without becoming a coward among the condemned. Mutual liability. The architecture of shared transgression. The names of those 200 are recorded in the Book of Enoch. Azazel, Samyasa, Armoros, Barakiel, Kakabiel. The text preserves them as deliberately as a criminal record. Each name, each specific crime, each piece of forbidden teaching they brought down that the earth was never meant to receive. Because they did not only bring children, they brought knowledge. They traded technology for flesh. The Watchers taught humanity advanced metallurgy beyond what Tuval-Cain had discovered. They taught how to forge shields, breastplates, and swords that could not be broken. They taught the cutting of roots and herbs, the first pharmacology, the first deliberate mixing of poisons and hallucinogens. They taught enchantments, and the resolving of spells, and astrology, and the reading of the signs of lightning. They opened the door of human capability far past what 16 centuries of natural, organic development should have produced. They artificially accelerated human civilization, introducing weapons of mass slaughter and tools of manipulation. And in exchange for this forbidden technology, they took what they wanted. They chose women from among the daughters of men. They took them as wives. They crossed the genetic boundary that God had established at the foundation of the world. And the children born from those unions, the offspring that walked out of those unnatural pregnancies and into the antediluvian world, were something the earth had never seen. Something it was not built to contain. Something that would soon push the entire ecosystem to the brink of total annihilation. CHNG 3:10 o'clock to 1700 hours. The word in Hebrew carries its own terrifying meaning in its very root. Nephilim. The fallen ones. Those who fall. Those who cause others to fall. Ancient scholars argued for centuries about which translation was correct. Looking at the devastation they caused, they may both be true. They were giants. But do not picture the clumsy, slow-moving monsters of children's fairy tales. The Book of Enoch and subsequent ancient texts describe a scale that staggers the imagination, beings whose height, whose density, whose physical power made ordinary human beings seem, by comparison, like insects. They were apex predators, genetically superior in strength, unmatched in violence, completely devoid of human empathy because they were only half human. At first, the earth fed them. The crops, the livestock, the wild animals that ranged across the vast antediluvian wilderness. The Nephilim consumed everything the land could produce. Their metabolism, their sheer size, required an intake of calories that ordinary agriculture could not sustain. And then they consumed everything faster than the land could produce it. The harvest disappeared. Entire fields stripped bare. Then the animals. Whole herds slaughtered and devoured. Then, when the grain was gone, and the cattle were gone, and the birds of the air had been hunted to exhaustion, they turned to human flesh. The Book of Enoch moves through this progression with clinical, unsettling precision. After the human beings came the birds. After the birds came the creatures of the sea. And when there was nothing left outside themselves, when the hunger became an absolute, overriding madness, they drank each other's blood. They turned on themselves. Pattern interrupt Stop for a second. Think about everything you have ever been taught about the ancient world. We are told it was a time of primitive hunter-gatherers. Simple people living simple lives, slowly figuring out how to plant wheat and domesticate dogs. Erase that picture. Imagine a world where cities of forged iron and bronze are being systematically hunted by biological anomalies. Imagine a global ecosystem collapsing under the weight of an invasive species that cannot be killed by conventional weapons. A world where the skies are thick with the smoke of continuous war, and the ground is soaked in the blood of billions. This is not a myth about a local flood. This is the story of a planetary containment protocol. End pattern interrupt Now understand what this reality meant for the normal people who were still alive. There was no government that could stop them. No army of Cain's descendants, with all their bronze weapons, sharp enough to penetrate skin that was like cracked volcanic stone. No city wall high enough to keep them out. No treaty powerful enough to negotiate peace. No offering sufficient to satisfy their hunger. The families of Seth, those who still gathered and called upon the name of the Lord, watched the world being consumed from the edges inward. They watched the grand, arrogant cities of Cain's descendants fall first. They watched the fields go silent. They watched their neighbors disappear in the night, and then entire communities. And then the silence came closer to their own doors. There were no courts recording these events. There was no historian with a scroll to write down the names of the dead. There was only the accumulation of absolute loss. Mothers who stopped looking for their missing children because they already knew exactly what had happened to them. Old men who sat at the threshold of their shelters in the morning light and simply waited for the inevitable. Villages that no longer sent traders to other villages because the roads between them had become slaughterhouses. The dust of that world was soaked. The soil beneath every city and every field held blood that had no justice behind it. Blood of the innocent. Blood of the guilty. Blood that simply ran because there was nothing left strong enough to stop the bleeding. The word the Hebrew text places over this specific era is Hamas. Lawless, unrestrained violence. Not war. War has rules, even brutal ones. War has treaties and surrenders. Hamas is violence that has shed every last constraint. Violence with no floor. Violence for the sheer sake of destruction. The cries of the dying rose from the earth. Not metaphorically. The text is very specific. 4 archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, looked down from the edges of the firmament and brought what they had witnessed directly before the throne of God. The Book of Enoch preserves their exact words. The cries of those who have perished have reached the gates of heaven. The souls of the dead are groaning. Their voice has reached heaven. They were being heard. Every single drop of blood was being counted. And then we reach the most overlooked, the most profoundly heartbreaking verse in all of Genesis. Chapter 6, verse 6. And the Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and it pained him to his heart. The being who spoke the universe into existence. The intelligence who separated light from darkness with a single word. Who breathed into dust and made it draw a breath. Who calibrated the precise mathematical distance between the earth and the sun so that water would stay liquid and life would not burn or freeze. That supreme, infinite being is described here in the language of human heartbreak. Not fury. Not rage. Not cold judicial calculation. Grieved. Pain to his heart. In the beginning, God looked at everything he had made and called it very good. The totality of creation, the perfect, genetic architecture woven into every living thing. The image pressed into human beings. The mathematics of biology itself very good. Now, that same creation was being torn apart. The genetic code he had placed into humanity, the Imago Dei, the image of God, was being actively, intentionally spliced with something that was never designed to touch it. And the world that resulted was one where 90% of the living things on earth existed in conditions of unrelenting terror. The flood was not an act of anger. It was a surgeon's decision. Made in deep grief, not fury. A decision to amputate a contamination before it completely consumed the tiny fraction of humanity that remained untouched. And there was exactly one thing remaining untouched. CHNG 4 1700 hours to 2600. His name appears in Genesis 6-9, attached to a single Hebrew word that changes the entire meaning of the Noah story. Tamim. Every English translation reaches for words like blameless, perfect, righteous, and Tamim carries all of that moral meaning, yes. But it carries something older and more specific beneath that. Unblemished. It is the exact same word used later in Leviticus to describe an animal suitable for sacrifice. A lamb with no physical defect. No contamination. No spot. Noah was Tamim. Morally, certainly, he was a righteous man in a dark generation. But also biologically. His genealogy, traced carefully through the line of Seth, had remained intact. In a world where the genetic blueprint of humanity had been systematically compromised, across 16 centuries of Watcher and human union, Noah's bloodline carried the original sequence. Unedited. Unaltered. Fully human. He was the last one. The last pure strain of the original design. And God said to him, "Build." The dimensions given in Genesis 6:15 are precise enough to be an architectural blueprint. 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. Using the standard ancient cubit of 18 inches confirmed against Egyptian and Babylonian texts, that gives us a vessel 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet high. Length to width ratio, exactly 6:1. Naval engineers in the 20th century, running open ocean survival simulations in advanced wave tanks, independent of any theological framework, concluded something startling. A 6:1 ratio is among the most stable proportions possible for a vessel that must remain upright in extreme conditions without being actively steered. This is not a boat designed to navigate to a destination. It has no sails, no oars, no rudder. It is a boat designed exclusively to survive. Someone who possessed absolute knowledge of fluid dynamics gave Noah those numbers. Now pay close attention to what comes next, because this is the part of the story that no children's book, no painting, and no Hollywood movie has ever captured correctly. Noah built that colossal ark in a world that had completely forgotten what an altar was. He lived among the descendants of Lamech's murder poem. He lived among people who had grown up hearing Tuvalcain's weapons praised as the height of craftsmanship. He lived among cities built without a single space for worship, where the loudest sounds were Jubilees' hypnotic music playing over the noise of a civilization that had absolutely no idea what was coming for them. And he picked up his tools anyway. He preached with his hammer. Every massive wooden plank that went up was a warning. Every heavy beam sealed with black pitch was a silent sermon to people who walked past him, pointing and laughing. For 100 years, no one listened. 100 years. Think about the psychological endurance required for that. Not a single convert. Not one family beyond his own wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. 8 people. One man standing against the overwhelming momentum of 16 centuries of accumulated moral and genetic collapse. And the only voice he had was the sound of wood being shaped in the blistering heat. The same neighbors who laughed on the first day still laughed on the 500th. The children who grew up watching him work the timber grew old watching him finish the roof. He was not a prophet they ignored once and moved on from. He was a prophet they ignored every single morning for a century. Dust settled deep into the lines of his hands. His shoulders bent under the sheer physical weight of the work, but even more under the weight of the silence from the people who watched him and turned away. But here is what the text does not explicitly record, and what is perhaps the most important detail of all. Noah never stopped. Not when the mocking was loud. Not when the silence was louder. Not when 100 years of faithfulness had produced exactly 0 visible results in his community. He kept cutting. He kept sealing. He kept building a massive, absurd object that made no logical sense to anyone alive because the instructions had come from a voice they could not hear. That is the shape of faithfulness when there is no audience for it. He kept building until it was done. And then, it rained. The Hebrew text of Genesis 7 reaches all the way back to the exact language of Genesis 1-2 when the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep, and the waters of creation had not yet been divided. The same deep. The same cosmic water. The same boundary. That boundary collapsed. The windows of heaven were opened. The waters above the firmament came crashing down. The fountains of the great deep broke open from beneath the earth's crust. Every boundary, every separation that had made the world a habitable ecosystem undone. Reversed. A systematic decreation. Every grand city Cain's descendants had built. Every blazing forge of Tuvalcain. Every hall where Jubilees' instruments had played through 4 centuries of tyrants who could not die. Gone. Swallowed. Silent. The Nephilim, for all their massive strength, for all their genetic superiority, could not tread water forever. The water had no opinion about any of it. It did not negotiate. It simply rose. And one wooden vessel, 450 feet long, sealed tight with pitch, built by a man who preached to a deaf world for 100 years, it floated. 150 days. That is how long the waters prevailed upon the earth. A silent, endless expanse of gray ocean covering the peaks of the highest mountains. Then, slowly, they began to recede. The ark settled on the jagged peaks of Ararat. And Noah, who had entered the vessel as a citizen of the ancient, terrible world of the Watchers, opened the door to step out into a world washed entirely clean. Outroad 2600-3000 he walked out into the sunlight and built an altar. The first thing he did in the new world was the very thing the old world had forgotten how to do. He worshipped. The human genome had survived. The unblemished sequence had been carried through the water, safe inside 8 people. The Watchers were bound in the darkness. The Nephilim were buried deep under layers of catastrophic mud and sediment. But the memory of what they built did not wash away completely. The ancient ruins still lie beneath the deserts. The forbidden knowledge they whispered to humanity, the weapons of war, the manipulation of the mind, The arrogant belief that we can alter the very code of life without consequence, that knowledge survived. We see it echoing today. In our laboratories. In our genetic editing. In our endless pursuit to become the architects of our own evolution. The flood washed the earth. But the human heart that stepped off the ark was still the same human heart. So tell me in the comments honestly, as you look at the world we are building today, are we the Nephilim now? Are we rebuilding the city of Nod, brick by brick, right over the ruins of the old one? If you want to go deeper into the hidden history of early scripture, into the forbidden texts and the lost truth of the ancient world, subscribe. Because the water may have receded, but there is much more still to uncover.